Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Berger. I am the Executive Director here at the Bremen Museum. It is my pleasure to welcome you today. It is a wonderful opportunity to have Eva speak with us today. She is a unique and powerful individual that will share some insights that you may not hear through other survivors' stories. One of the things that I take great pride in here at the Bremen is that we really focus on Jewish resourcefulness and resilience, and these are evident in Eva's story. So with that, Eva Baron.
Thank you. Ooh. I've never spoken with a microphone before. I always yell so they don't put a microphone on me. I'm not used to this. I hope you can hear me well. First of all, thank you for coming. I'm honored to be here and to talk to you, to be invited to talk to you. And I'm going to go right into it. I am born Hungarian. Actually, I should just say a few minutes about that. I was really born in Czechoslovakia. And I come from an area that kept on changing. And we became Hungarians by the time I was entering school. I was fluent in Czech. That was my first language. And I don't even understand it now. I don't know why. Somehow I got stuck with Hungarian. And even though I was pretty young when I came to the States, into the 9th grade, and I'm stuck with a Hungarian accent, which I don't really like because I went through school being called Zsa, and that's not very good. I kept on saying that actually I'm Eva, and there was an Eva, but they liked Zsa better. And my last name, my maiden name was Chajmovitz, and I spelled it like the original spelling, Chajmovitz. So I have a Zsa Chaj, which really, that's how I went through school. But when it came to spelling it, nobody ever misspelled it. Everybody said, why don't you change your name at the spelling? I said, no, this is how my father spelled it, and that's all I have is this name. Anyway, I was born in an area, I don't know how old I am there, but here we are. This is how far I am from my original place, Hungary. I don't miss it at all. I barely remember it. I only went back to my hometown once after camp, and that's it. Now, that's Hungary there. I have this picture just in relationship to Poland. This is Hungary, and Poland is here. It seems so close together, and yet it seemed very far away at that time. It is now Carpato-Ukraine. This is constantly shifting. By about 10 miles, we became Ukraine. I wasn't there. This was after the war when the map was once again redrawn. So it's Ukraine, and spelled differently, and we went from C-H-U-S-T to H-U-S-Z-T to Ukrainian K-S-O-K-S-U-S-T. So this is, go fast. Part of the Hungarian troops entered the city of Hust. You know, by this time, I'm 12 years old when this starts, sometime. In the very beginning, it was such an insidious start, and one person, SS arrived, but you see, they had the cooperation of the Hungarian so-called Arrow Cross. And they were really helping them. The Hungarian Arrow Cross was the Hungarian SS, and they helped the SS. So they didn't need too many SS officers. And so I remember looking out the window and my father coming home, and it was still cold, so it was early in the year, because he had this fur-lined jacket, sort of a three-quarter coat, and he had a yellow star. And that's the first time that I saw my father with the yellow star, and I remember staring at it. But nothing was happening to me. You see, Hungary, by the time that I am telling you this story, the European Jews were dead. Simple as that. Because they started in other countries. Hungary was left for last. And the fact that we were killed was due to a man called Eichmann, who decided that, my goodness, look at all these Jews left over in Hungary. I understand, I don't know, but I understand that even Himmler at that time said, quit, because the Allies were coming north in Italy. I don't know if you saw the movie Patton, that there was between Patton and the British General Montgomery, there was sort of they were vying for certain areas. And so that was already going on. Mussolini was hanging, they killed him. And Eichmann was busy with the Jews. He had to commandeer not the trains, but the tracks for the trains, because we were, soldiers were coming and going from east to west. And they were coming through that area. And that was really more important. But he had enough clout that he said he needs the tracks, he needs the trains. And he got it. So it takes ages to tell you this. I have to condense it, because things happen very fast. My father, I only remember 4 SS officers. And we were in a house. We actually had, at one point, a German from the Wehrmacht, just, plain army, not SS, not anything, a colonel living with us. They commandeered, the house was in an L shape. We had a bathroom, indoor plumbing, I come from an area where that was not the usual. So they took, and it's always my room that they took. And I was shifted over to my parents' bedroom. That's why I remember it. And that happened more than once. So we had always, the Germans were around us. And nothing was happening. This man, this colonel used to sit in the den, like we call the day room, with my father, having something to drink and talking. And these people all knew of what was going to happen to us. And nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. My father was arrested when the rest of the Germans came in, and we didn't know. He was taken away. A week later, they came into our house. We got a few hours to pack and leave the house, which we did. And I remember, so my mother so relied on me. My brother was 2 years older than I, and my little brother was 8 years old at that time. So my mother and I were packing. We had a maid who lived in. She was a Jewish lady, and she went to her room. She was packing for herself. It was such I barely remember it. We were throwing things in suitcases. My father was in the lumber business, and sawmill, furniture factory, and lumber coming in. So we had sports-like equipment in the house, like rucksacks. So we had 2 of those. We had some suitcases. My mother actually said to my brother, go and get a carriage because we cannot carry this. So ridiculous. We actually ordered a carriage to come to the house and put this junk onto the carriage. We were collected in a synagogue for a day or 2. After that, we went into a ghetto, which was a designated area in our hometown. We went into a house. My mother knew the person, but there were 2 or maybe 3 families there. It's all vague in my mind, because then we had to be separated. They put mattresses on the floor, and like 5 girls were in that room and managed. I was not deprived in that place. The women cooked, there was enough food. We were there for 5 or 6 weeks, approximately. The day, they were collecting the villages from all over in the area into these bigger towns. We had, the town was we called it a city, but I don't think it was a city, but it had an excellent gymnasium, which was, the high school that I cannot compare it to any high school here. And we had very good schools. People used to come and board in the town to go to that gymnasium. I was too young for all of that, but it was that kind of a town. The population was Jewish, Roman Catholic, and Pravoslav. It's a Slavic. Ruthenians, they called them. They spoke Russian, wrote Cyrillic, which I knew very well. I have forgotten that too. I wish I would remember all the things that I have forgotten, but that's how it happens. Anyway, just wanted to tell you a little bit about the town. And now we can go very fast. The day before we were taken away from this ghetto, my father was released from wherever he was. He came, he joined us in the ghetto, and I remember staring at him. He was with a bunch of men and women in a room telling them of what had happened to him in those 6 weeks. And what I remember staring at him is that they shaved a 2-inch area into his hair. And the hair grew, and this also grew, but it made this a dent, like. Why do I remember this? But I remember staring at that. The very next day, and also happened is people started to put away valuables on their clothing. They sewed in jewelry, they did everything. Well, my mother did it, put $100 bills. My father had American money. Dollars were everything. It was very easy because you folded the dollars and you could put them in and it didn't stick out. And she was very happy with that. And everybody had it, even my little brother had some money in his coat. The very next day after my father came home from wherever he was, they took us, we marched towards a brick factory. It was always a brick factory because they had an arm of the tracks come to the factory, so you could have these wagons, train wagons, come be loaded, and then it went very fast. We were loaded on these wagons. There were about 90 people in one of these wagons. When I went to the museum in Washington, they have one of these things there. And I looked at it and I said to myself, this is much smaller than what I see here. How did 90 people get on this? But we were, and we were in the corner. My father was really a very honored person in our town. He was the last president of the Jewish community, and they gave us the corner of that train, the wagon. And it had a little window, open, not a window, but just a square opening. It was crisscrossed with barbed wire, but we were there. Just as we were loaded onto this, one man, I don't know how, but the SS found something, maybe a piece of jewelry, but something in the heel of his shoe. And he was shot. Plain shot. It was such a terrible thing to us. I mean, we never thought of something actually being shot. It just didn't occur to us. So my father immediately started thinking, we have to get rid. We were already on the train, but he said, we must get rid of whatever we have, because they might look again wherever we go, and they'll shoot us. So we spent quite a bit of time as the train started to move during the night. At one point, he even picked me up, so I will throw it out. He made little airplanes, like, out of the $100 bills, so they would shoot out. The train wasn't going that fast, and we didn't want to be caught. So it was, otherwise we sat on that train. I don't remember eating on that train. I don't remember going to the bathroom on that train. I know that we were silent. Somehow, we didn't talk. We didn't talk to each other. And 3 days later, the doors opened, and we were in Auschwitz. But we didn't know we were in Auschwitz. My father looked out to that little window that I was telling you about, and he said, it doesn't look bad. It looks like there are a bunch of prisoners there. He saw people in striped things. He says, it looks like that's a prison camp. I don't know. He just wanted to make us feel good. He ran and immediately, as the doors opened, they told us, rouse, and one man was helping from the Sonderkommando. I don't know, I can't go into everything, but there was designated Jewish guys who were inmates who helped get these people off the train fast. Everything had to go fast. And my father went to the opening, to the doors, and this 15-year-old, actually, she is a second cousin of mine, but she was shorter than I, very petite and very pretty girl. He was helping her off the train, and as he took her off, he said to her, if somebody asks you, say you are 17. Actually, she was 15. And he came rushing back to me, and he said, if somebody asks you, say you are 17. And then we were, and I don't know why, but whether my mother heard that, and because of that, she put 3 dresses on me. And I was in braids, that was the style. The young kids were in braids. My mother took the braids off and made my hair big. And I had 3 dresses on. I was very skinny and I was a picky eater, and that was my thing. So they put 3 dresses on me. I was arguing with my mother, I want to wear the sandals. And she said, you have to wear, my father by that time, he said, you're wearing the ski shoes. He saved my life with that. I put on the ski shoes. My brother had the same kind of shoes, only his were for boys, square-toed. I see those shoes. And off we went. Just as I was jumping off, my father took my arm and he squeezed it. I almost feel that now. He said nothing. He looked around, he looked down at me, and he jumped off the train. And it was like, looking back at it, I say to myself, it's like he said to himself, there's nothing else I can do. He jumped off the train. My older brother jumped off with him because immediately they screamed, men this way, women this way, women and children this way. And I never saw my father and brother again. That was it. My mother and I got off the train. She was holding my little brother's hand on one side, and I was holding her hand on the other side. And we marched immediately. We came to the end of this. There was a lineup of SS officers and soldiers. In the middle there was the man with a stick, and he just went this way and that way, and he came down between my mother's hand and my hand. He said, go to this side. And I looked around and I was separated from my mother. I just turned around and I left. I went after my mother. And this man in the center, it probably he must have said to himself, go get her, I mean, how dare you go that way? I sent you this way. Not because, I don't know, but he got me back. And he said, how old are you? I said 17, sort of quietly, because I never thought anybody would believe I'm 17, but my father told me I should say 17. So I said 17. He pushed me to this side again, and that was the so-called good side. See, going after my mother, I was going to the gas chamber. And so I went to that side, and I remember turning around. I still didn't go. I stood there and I turned around, and my mother was a few feet away. She turned around and looked at me. She didn't say anything, but she went like this, like, go that way. Instinct. It was all instinct on my mother's side. She didn't know where she was going. And I turned around and I went on that side. I never saw my mother, my little brother again. Everybody vanished at that point. I didn't know that I will never see them again. I went to the so-called good side. My Aunt Ida, this was her. I thought she was old. She was 35 years old. And she was a tall, blonde, blue-eyed lady. And she came home to stay with her mother because her husband, she was childless, and her husband was taken away 2 years before. So she came home and stayed with her mother, which was a village near to this town where we lived. So my grandmother was taken to the bad side. She was taken to the good side. So there I had my Aunt Ida, whom I didn't know very well, but we were together. And in 2 seconds, we were lined up in fives and we marched. My whole life for the next months and months were being lined up and marching, lined up in fives and marching. We got to a barrack, we got into the barrack, we sat down on, before we got in, we had to take off our clothes. Everything, socks, Everything except the shoes. Hold on to your shoes. Think about it. I wanted to wear sandals. And I held on to these ski shoes. They were high top ski shoes. And we went in, and the hair was shaved off. I remember we were staring at each other because it's so interesting what difference hair makes. And suddenly, from one minute to the next, we didn't recognize each other. And if you'll pardon me, every hair, pubic hair, everything was shaved off. I didn't have pubic hair. I didn't have breasts. I kept on saying, now what are they going to say? Are they not going to believe that I'm 17? But nobody asked me anymore. I passed, in the beginning. And from then on, I was masquerading as an adult. We were lined up, we were shaved. By this time it was dark. We were marching again. We were put into a barrack. We did not know where we were. We were all sitting on the floor. And all I remember about that first night is from time to time, there was a voice crying out in the night, "Where is my baby? Where is my baby?" And as the voice escalated, somebody slapped that person. And it was quiet for a while. And then somebody else, you see, people were separated from their children. And they didn't know where they were. And I remember that night it was cold. My head was cold. And my aunt said to me, because we were thrown a dress. We didn't have the striped uniforms. We were just thrown a dress and the panties. And I had these heavy panties. My aunt said to me, "Put the panties on your head." And I did. And I remember the little happiness. I felt so good because my head was warm. The next day, we were reassigned. We looked around. We were in Camp C. We were never tattooed. I was in Block 27, block meaning barrack. I don't know if you have seen pictures of Auschwitz. And there are buildings, and especially the so-called Hungarian camp, because they were put together like in the last minute. They needed more room. They needed to make room for the Hungarians. So they put us into, there were 1,000 people. Each barrack could accommodate 1,000 women. And there were 32 barracks in one camp, which was surrounded by electrified barbed wire. Next to us was the Czech camp, but that was Czech. We called it Czech camp because there were Czech women there, but it was Camp B, so A, B, C. I was in C. We were never tattooed. It was like a holding camp. And when I say holding camp is that we did not work in Auschwitz. Our misery in Auschwitz was that every morning when you woke up and you faced the day, there was always a chance that you will be selected out to the gas chamber. And that kind of mental anguish, which was anguish only in the beginning. After a while, you were numb. You just sort of went along. But also in the beginning, frequently when we got out in the morning for so-called Zähl Appell, in other words, to be counted. They counted us forever. I don't know why, because there was no place to go, but we were counted. But in the beginning, when we got out in the morning, there were many women hanging on the wire. They just snuck out at night and committed suicide. They did not see of why living. It was the end of the road. But it was fewer and fewer. You got used to it in a sense that you didn't want to die. Well, in the very beginning, they picked out the good-looking people. Good-looking, by that mean not beautiful, but people that look good. And they were shipped out, they were tattooed and shipped out to different German factories, to Germany and to factories. And we were left behind, and we were left behind, and we were left behind. In this leaving behind, I was there for 5 months, like that. There were constant selections. Many times just officers came and selected, and those who didn't look so good went straight to the gas chamber. 2 significant selections for me were, we were there for about 3 months, when there was a big selection, and there was a person by the name of Dr. Mengele, very famous name, who was in charge. He was actually Hungarian. He spoke Hungarian. He's constantly laughing. He was a good-looking young man. I see his face so clearly. It drives me crazy that I see his face clearly and I do not see. I can't conjure up my father's face. Because these are the people that, remained tattooed in my mind. And he came. It was always bad when he came somehow. It was just another selection, but we were so afraid of him. And he was so rough. So my aunt said by that time, I was in bad shape in terms of, I was strong, I was still good, but I was very skinny. And my aunt, who was so much taller and everything, she started to let go a little bit. She always felt she's going to save my life for her brother. And, well, she said to me, look, you go a few people ahead of me, because we were single-filed, undressed. That was selection. Here were the shoes, here was the dress, and this is how we walked. Naked. Holding shoes, holding the dress, and zooming, single file, and going past this man who, and always 2 SS soldiers were with him. She said to me, go 4 or 5 people ahead of me, and I will follow you no matter which side. We already thought that I will go certainly to so-called left side. So she wanted to tell me that she will follow me no matter which way they take me. And just as I was coming towards Mengele, he was talking to the soldiers, he was laughing, and a few women sort of passed by fast. And I said, oh, I am going to do the same thing. And all of a sudden, I feel this on my shoulders, and it's Mengele's hands. And I stiffened up, and I tried to make myself taller, to stand straight. And he turned me left and right. And my mind was, I'm going to the left side. But I was still straight, and I looked up into his face. And it appealed to him. I don't know, it's a long story that took seconds. He pushed me to the good side. And I jumped, because there were already people there, and I tried to bury myself into those people, because I said, surely he's going to change his mind and take me out of there. But just as I buried me, I turned around, just my face was visible, because my aunt was behind me, my Aunt Ida. And just as I turned around, I saw Aunt Ida going to the gas chamber. And I never saw her again. And I was left at that point completely alone. I attached myself to a Mrs. Haber and her daughter, a friend of my mother's. Her daughter Ali was a good friend of mine. And I was there, and the maid was taken away early. And so there were 3 of us, and we found 2 more. We always had to have 5. And we were like that for another month or so. And I must backtrack, just tell you one thing, because I told you about the Czech camp next to us. These were people who were there, as we found out later, from Theresienstadt, from a place Terezin. They brought them to Auschwitz, and with children. They didn't change their clothing or shave their heads, and we saw them right away. I mean, of course, we were just separated by wires, and there were little children there. And we said, they said they killed the children. No, they didn't. Look at the camp. There are children there. They didn't kill the children. Well, 4 weeks later, a short while later, they had what they call Blocksperre. They closed us in, and all we heard all night long is trucks going and trucks coming and singing. And they were singing the Czech national anthem, which is very beautiful, which I recognized. And the first line of it is Kde domov můj, which means, where is my home? The anthem actually has that in their first line. And they sang that, alternating with the Hatikva. And I remember, and there were Czechs. The Czechs were very Reformed Jews. But they moved to Hatikva, and they were singing that. And they knew they were going to the gas chamber. And all we heard all night long is trucks and the singing of the Hatikva and the Czech national anthem. In the morning, when we were let out, there wasn't a single living soul in that camp. The day after, when we came out, the camp was full. Not only that, these were people that were brought in from Poland, from Lodz. There's a city, Lodz. They came from a Lodz camp. I just thought I would tell you that it was a horrendous night. Anyone who was there in Camp C, of course, heard everything. I'm sure that if they're alive today, they remember that night. It was something, and we never fell asleep. We were so quietly lying there in our bed, which was 12 people to one bed, with legs overlapping. You could only sleep on one side. Everybody had to turn if you wanted to turn onto another side, just planks. Anyway, I just thought I would mention that because it was a horrendous night. Then, a month or so, 2 months after my Aunt Ida was taken away, we had a huge selection. You see, the Russians were coming, and they just wanted to get rid of us somehow. So you couldn't, there were still thousands of people. I mean, Auschwitz had 1 million people at one time or another. And so, either I'm talking too much or somebody has a phone call, but anyway, there was a Blocksperre, meaning we were locked in, and Mengele came with other officers and soldiers, and what they did, they put us all in. See, we had odd numbers on one side and even numbers on the other side, and they opened these doors, and everybody went to the even numbers. And then the soldiers held hands, and we had to run from one side to the other. It was sort of running the gauntlet. And as we were running by, the soldiers, some of the officers that were assigned to do that, picked out those that didn't look good to them. I remember deciding that I'm just gonna fly across. I couldn't do much. There was no way of saving yourself. But you could somehow decide, I'm gonna walk straight, I'm gonna stand straight, when that's about all you could do. And the rest was up to God, I don't know. And I made it. Mrs. Haber made it. Ollie made it. We got there, it was already dark. This started early in the morning. We got nothing to eat. We didn't even get that black coffee. We hardly had any food. We used to get a pot for 12 people and just go round and round. Can't waste my time with that. There was no food. And we were sitting there. I don't know, I'm never thirsty, but I said to Mrs. Haber, I hear they're giving water on the other end of the barrack. We were already finished. We were finished with them. We made it the selection. And I said, I'm going to drink water. I don't know what got into me because I wasn't even thirsty. But I went because it was so bad to see Mrs. Haber and to see her worry about Ollie. Ollie was taller than I and also skinny. And I went to the other side and there was a woman with a ladle giving you drinking water. As I was drinking that water, it was dark outside. The doors opened and somebody started to yell, "Rouse!" And the woman who was giving me the water said to me, "Go, it's a good transport." And I said, "Oh, I'm going to get Mrs. Haber. It's a good transport." But they shoved me out. I never saw Mrs. Haber again. And it's dark and I'm lined up and we are in fives and we are marching. And we got to a building. They said, "Get undressed." It was, by this time it's November. It's very cold at night. And we got undressed and they were standing there naked and in fives and we were hugging each other and then alternating because the person who was on the outside was cold. So we were alternating all night long. When the sun came up, you know, we got into the building. Again, looked at, you know, if you had a pimple, you failed. You didn't make it. We were given a piece of bread and new clothing, not new clothing, but different clothing. And they sort of looked at me and gave me a dress that, I had something that was practically to the floor. It was a woman's dress. And I was in that for 5 months. But then they gave me something that looked more decent. And that's because they were sending us to Germany to a factory and they didn't want to send total idiotic looking people because that's how we looked. So I had hair, by 5 months you have hair. I had this dress that fitted me a little better. They put us on the train, not too many people in a wagon. We could sort of stretch out. I don't know how long, but we ended up in Leipzig. And we got out from Leipzig and then we marched again because Leipzig was just the center and then these were these tentacles all over because I don't know if you ever see a map of Germany and concentration camps. It's full of these little camps, and they are administered from a center. In my case, it was Leipzig. Dachau was a center, and with these tentacles, and administered by Dachau. Very organized. German organization. And we got to Leipzig. We got to it was like a village, but they had a factory there. And Heineken, and we got there. The big thing there was that we had our own bed. Bed meaning three tiers, but individual, just planks, but individual. And we had a cup. Now this was ultimate luxury, I just want you to know that. And somehow we relaxed. We were 150 Hungarian women, 350 Polish women who were there already when we got there. So all the good jobs were taken by these Polish Jewish women, you know, the kitchen, whatever. As camps go, it was not bad. I don't think I would have survived a horror again. But it was a working camp. We were assigned, they came in a few days later, they asked whoever speaks German, we need 10 women. And you know, I put up my hand. I speak German. Okay, so I got a job in the factory. I was sharpening bits. I found out here, a gentleman told me that it's called bits that you put into machines, but these were different sizes. Some of them were really huge, and these cogs had to be measured. And I had certain machines that these things fitted into, and to the 10th of a millimeter, I became very good at it. I became very good at it. I became so good that they sent me to school. I was shamefully helping the Germans towards the end of the war. Anyway, an SS woman came, took me to a room in the buildings. There was a huge compound, and with a bunch of men, I was sitting and I was listening to a lecture. What they were teaching me was to read a blueprint so that they don't have to talk to me when they come to the window to give me to sharpen the knife. They brought the blueprint, and I could read the blueprint and sharpen the knife accordingly. I did it. And I remember that my chief, the German man, everybody was old, and every young person was in the army. From time to time, Hitler Jugend children would march through and sing songs, so we knew that they existed, you know. And this man came and asked me, "How old are you?" You know, and I told him I was 13 at that time. He went like this. He just couldn't believe it. But this didn't mean that he brought me potatoes sometimes. They didn't have much to eat. Anyway, this is how it went. We had the women there. We got a slice of bread when we came back from work. We got up at 4, we lined up, they counted us. We then marched to the factory, which was an hour. We worked from 6 to 6 in the factory. Then there was an hour to walk back. And then we got this piece of bread. And I remember we always looked at each other's slice, because the question was, how did you fare today? If you got the heel of the bread by accident, of the loaf, you fared very well because it was slightly bigger. I don't even know if it was bread. I don't know if it was wheat. It was very hard, but that's what we ate. And there was also some mold on some of the pieces. We ate the mold first. I didn't know I was discovering penicillin at the time, but we ate that mold. And during the Sunday afternoons, all day Sunday, the women congregated and they cooked in imagination. They were exchanging recipes. They were arguing how to make certain things. And there was a lady who was below me. And she was a professor of French in Cluj, in Transylvania. And she said, let them cook, I'm going to teach you French. We were stealing little pieces of paper and pencil, and I was learning French. I mean, it's so ridiculous, the whole thing, when I think back. But everything helped you survive. We were not beaten there. There was an older man who was in charge of the camp, an officer, but he left everything to his assistant. And the assistant was a miserable, miserable woman, SS woman. She wanted us lined up, not only lined up, but lined up by inch. And if you were slightly out, she whacked you here. I was the recipient of one such whack here. And truthfully, when you think of seeing stars, you see stars. But you know, you straightened yourself out because I was flying ahead. As she hit me, I was stepped back, got into line, not a word. But it only happened once, and she did it to others. But we were not beaten. The chief of the camp was a kind old man. I have no other word for them. And we worked for them. 500 women total. One day, they gave us 3 pieces, 3 days ration. Bread, and we are marching out. And that's when the end of the end came upon me. We marched for 3 weeks without food. It was called the Death March. My Margit Nene, Aunt Margit, my French professor, she, due to this woman hitting her once, she fell down. And when she fell, I don't know how old this lady was. You know, everybody seemed old to me. She was not old. Nobody was old. She fell down. She broke her hip. Only we didn't know she broke her hip. She couldn't get up. So, but what I want to say is that the chief of the camp arranged a horse and not a carriage with wheels, 2 wheels, how would you call that? Harnessed it to a horse, and she was lying down. He did not leave her behind, and he did not kill her. That was really something to say. So that is kind of a camp it was. The man was not the maniac of the rest of them. And we were marching. We didn't know where we were going. I remember once we were near the Elbe River, and I always heard something from women, where I think we are here, I think we are there, you know. We did not. The food that we got for 3 days, we ate in 2, and that's it. We didn't have anything to eat. And many times in the morning when we got started, we were going through a small city or something, and people were looking out the window. And, you know, later on when people were telling me, you know, we knew nothing. Trust me, everybody saw us. We didn't look good. They knew who we were. And after 3 weeks, sometimes we were going in circles. And as far as eating, there was always a woman who said, there's a blade of grass and it's edible. I don't know, she made it up. And when we got there, when we stopped for the night off the road, we were looking for that blade of grass and we ate it. And that's when I got sick. I got horrendous dysentery, and we were marching, and there's no bathroom. And I was on the end. And as we were marching, to go to the bathroom, and that thing just came down me, and I was so ashamed, and I was afraid, because the SS woman that was marching with me, I didn't know her, and I smelled, and I said, they're gonna shoot me. And the lady who was in the center of the five grabbed me here by my dress and exchanged places with me. And I didn't know her. I didn't know whether she was one of the Hungarian or the Polish women. But I said to myself, she too saved my life. She exchanged places with me, put me in the middle, so I won't smell next to the SS woman. Once they were bombing the factory, and we were lying in the grass, and we knew that the Russians bombed at night, and the Americans bombed during the day. Because the Russians had the Molotov candles. I don't know if I'm not going to go into this, but they threw that down and that lit up the place, and they bombed at night. The Americans, and we were lying, they told us off the road quickly into the grass, and we were lying down and looking up, and like birds, the sky was just full of planes and pretty high up, and suddenly we see bombs coming out. And at first they sort of tumble out, and then they go straight, and I said, this one is coming straight to my nose. But before they hit close down, they veer off. I became an expert in that. They never hit us, but a woman said, oh my God, they're gonna bomb us. And then another woman said, don't be silly, these are Americans, they wouldn't bomb us. And I said, how do they know who is down here? I mean, we had this kind of they're Americans. The Americans will not touch us. But the Americans were very far away from us. We came to a certain, after 3 weeks, sometimes we were down in circles, I don't know. It was horrendous. That's when everybody got very sick. We came to this wall after 3 weeks. We were lined up single file. We were there in the morning, and we were standing, and pretty soon there was, a woman said, they're going to kill every fourth person. I don't know. And I remember saying to myself, shall I switch places now? And then I said to myself, how can you figure out where the fourth person is? So we'll just stand there. Around noon, the gates opened, and this beautiful woman with a star on horseback comes out with another man, an SS man on horseback. They came out, they talked to each other, then he went like this, they said goodbye to each other, he left, and she said, inside, go in. And we were in Terezin. It was called Theresienstadt. And people it was full. It was full. You see, all these little camps, like our camp, were taken to Terezin. They didn't know what to do with us. They couldn't kill us anymore. We had no crematorium like in Auschwitz. And they couldn't shoot 500 people here and 1,000 people there. So they marched, and everybody marched. It was really, really the end of the war. Because we were in Terezin maybe 3-4 weeks, and the Russians came. But then we were very sick. They put us back into quarantine because they thought we had typhus. Another chapter of my life began. After that, it's a new PhD. So I'm going to end it here. Go ahead. This is my brother and I. The thing about that skirt, the occasion for the picture is that my aunt, Sarah, my mother's sister, made me that, crochet that thing, and my mother put it on and said, let's go to the photographer. So that's why I have it. And I found it here in the United States because she sent it to her brother. And I found nothing at home. This is my little brother. You see, this is what the Germans killed. These gorgeous children went to gas chambers. So we were in school, and then no Jewish kid was allowed to in the public school. So we had this Jewish school or Hebrew school, something. It was in Hungarian, but it was only Jewish kids. These are two classes here. There are 57 people here. 5 made it out of, survived out of this group that you see. 5 came out of camp. I don't know how long they lived after, but 5 came out of this 57 group. I think you know where I am, next to next, that's it. I don't know. That's me. This is a picture, I have to tell you very fast. My uncle, my youngest uncle, was a young man. He was in Brno, Czechoslovakia. He was entering medical school when Hitler came in and did away with Czechoslovakia. I don't know if you know that part of the history. And he came running underground already back to my father because he didn't dare to go home to his father because he was afraid. He was already underground. My father gave him $1,000 on the way to everything was in dollars. He was trying to get out to Palestine, and he made it. He made it out to Palestine. He bombed the ship or torpedoed. He ended up with a child on his back, but he made it. And he became a tragic person. He never went back to school, nothing. They made him into a diamond polisher in Israel. He spoke Hebrew. He was a graduate of the finest gymnasium, and then in Brno. And so they required Greek and Latin in those schools. And he spoke Hebrew, the modern Hebrew. So he got along language-wise. He worked there. Meantime, his older brother, my other uncle, tried to get him out. When Senator Claude Pepper, I don't know if you know that name, but Senator Claude Pepper was a friend of my uncle's and did a great deal. He tried to help to get my Uncle Jay into Columbia University, and they were accepting him. But everything, fell apart because the United States entered the war. After that, everything was locked out. There is another family, the oldest uncle, who lived in Italy, in Fiume at that time. Lived in Italy, man, wife, 3 children, and a mother-in-law, and Senator Pepper got him out of Italy. in the last ship before the United States entered the war. The boys were 18 and 19, and within 6 months they were in the army. And one actually stayed in the army, went up to brigadier general. So it was really, he made it his career. He liked it. Anyway, this picture, my mother said, Jay is Palestine. He must have a picture of us. Grabbed us after school to the photographer. You didn't have little cameras. You did, but they were not good enough to have a good picture. And Jay was at the airport in Miami waiting for me. And the minute he saw me, he took out his wallet. And this picture was in there. And he gave it to me. And that's why I have it, because I don't have pictures from there. This was, when we became Hungarians for a while, we needed a passport actually to go because they considered us Czechs. So this was a passport picture. My mother was taking me to Budapest because I had an aunt there, and happily went with my mother to Budapest, but we needed a passport, and that's my mother and I on a passport picture. And this is my mother, her younger sister Sarah, and my little brother. My mother was upset because she didn't lose enough weight after the baby. I mean, when I think about it, this is Sarah. See, these are the little pictures that we could take, and I don't know, but I found that in Sarah's house. My little brother and I, gorgeous as usually, and my Aunt Sarah. See, she was not married yet at that time, and she was in our house a lot, visiting. We were very, very close-knit family. Every black dot is a concentration camp. Now, here are the gorgeous women after camp. We had nothing, we didn't have good food to eat. We had food, but it was all carbohydrates. Everybody got fat. And this was in a kibbutz in Germany because I was ready to go to Palestine. It didn't even occur to me that I should go to the United States. But my aunt actually sat on me. This is already in Bremenhaven, Germany. We were there, instead of 3 days, we were there for 3 months because the ships went on strike. And instead of coming here in 1946, I came in 47 because we sat there and they kept on sending people, very crowded. And once the ships started to come, I came on a converted battleship, the Ernie Pyle. I don't know if you know Ernie Pyle, was a very famous reporter, was killed. He was loved, famous, good, and they named a battleship after him. And that's the ship I came on. I had so much hair, I didn't know what to do with it. It's sitting on top of my head. And this is already Mount Sinai. I graduated from Mount Sinai Hospital School of Nursing. That cap that we didn't like was 100 years old, so you had to wear it. And it was graduation day, and somebody took a picture. This is the first baby, my husband and I, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I went back to school after Mount Sinai and got another degree, and I was teaching nursing in New York and then in Ann Arbor. I was supporting my husband. He was a resident. He made $1,000 a year. Couldn't live on that. And that's my grandchildren, daughter and son-in-law. And here are all the gorgeous women. Pamela Baron, Andrea Baron, she is an attorney, she is a physician, I am a mother, and he is a radiologist. That's it. Do say what I said. What did I say here? Auschwitz was the ultimate lesson. There must be something in people that can be cultured into something better than what we have now. I'm sorry, I think I went over time. I usually do. I don't have that much. I look at Judy. You know, it's so difficult to either you say something in 10 minutes, or then, you know, you think of something and then you go off on a tangent because something else happened at the same time. It's not easy to do it coherently, but I do hope I didn't mix you up, that I was on point. And as I said, after that, it's another story.
I know you know it now, but did you know that the time that there was gas, people being gassed?
That, you see, we saw the crematoria, 5 of them in Auschwitz. We were not near it, but you know, we could smell burning flesh. And there is nothing like it. You remember that. And the Hungarians, when they came, they killed 10,000 a day. Just think of the logistics of it. And so I never wanted to think about it because I always felt maybe my mother didn't die in the gas chamber. Maybe she was still alive. Maybe, you know, you make up things in your mind. You hope that she inhaled and died fast. I mean, you know, and then they burned the bodies. And there were so many when the Hungarians came, because they kept on sending them. There were 800,000 Hungarian Jews. And Budapest was not touched. So my Aunt Sarah, who was married by that time, had 2 babies, well, a 3-year-old and a newborn, was saved by a man called Wallenberg. I don't know if you ever heard of that name, who set up Swedish protectorate houses in Budapest. She was saved by him. Simeon, did you want to say something?
Eva, how many people would you say were on that death march from Auschwitz?
In my camp, 500.
500.
500. But I met other people who were in that area. In fact, a second cousin of mine, she was not too far away. She never made it to Terezin because during one of the, I mean, people had stories. So every individual has a story that is fantastic. Because she during one of those air raids, she was in the grass, and 3 of them decided to stay there. So when they got up and marched further, the 3 of them stayed there, and they were in a village, and they walked, they pretended they all spoke German, and you know, they put them in a group with these young kids who were Hitlerjugend. That's where they were liberated. They pretended that they were workers. I mean, there were all kinds of people.
What percentage of those 500 do you think survived?
The 500 survived, including that lady. Now, I don't know, you see, once we were in Theresienstadt, There were so many people there when we were put in. And we got separated from the 500 just went all over. I stuck with Mrs. Lichtenstein, her daughter, and Mrs. Lichtenstein's sister. We stuck together. But 500 survived the march, but sick. So I don't know how many of those died actually in Terezin, because you see, we got nothing from the Russians in terms of needs, excuse me, or food. They gave us kasha every single day, and there is no food. There was no food, and sick people, and some of them in better shape than others. I don't know. Yes.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for sharing your story. In regard to being liberated by the Russians, was it when it was final? Was it phased out, or did they just set you outside and tell you to go about your way?
Pretty much do whatever you want to, but we didn't know where to go. We didn't know where to go. And we snuck out, and we made it to Prague. We thought we were walking to us was already nothing. We thought we would just walk to Prague, but a truck picked us up. We were only 60 kilometers from Prague. We didn't know.
I think we have time for one more question.
How did you get to the United States? Who brought you to the United States?
Oh, that's my other chapter. Really is a long other story. I was in DP camps. I made it to Budapest. I found out my brother and father in Prague. I found out that my brother and father did not make it, that I was totally alone. Then I found out that in Budapest there are people who were not touched. I said, I'll go to Budapest, to that aunt. I mentioned it, the skirt. And Mrs. Lichtenstein, we were going east. We thought we would go home. But I wasn't going home. I just wanted to go to Budapest. It took us, it's about 350 kilometers, I think, between the two cities. It took us 8 days. There were no trains or schedules. We got on a train in the right direction, and we got off when the train stopped. And we sat there, sometimes overnight, sometimes 2 days, and then a train came, we got on, and then the last leg of that trip, I was on the roof of the train with some Romanian officers. We were up there. The train was going so slowly that a soldier jumped off, picked fruit, jumped back on, gave us fruit to eat. And 8 days and the 300 kilometers. Yes. Anything else? We finished.
There's one last question. I wanted to let you know we have volunteers who are passing around pencils, if you need pencils, to fill out the surveys that are on your chairs. These surveys are a great way to make a donation to the Bremen without actually opening your wallet. This is how we get grant funding to provide this program and others. The second thing I wanted to make an announcement about is that immediately after the program, we'll have guided tours to the Holocaust Gallery. So you're welcome to go through it with the docent and learn from the experience that we have in there after that. So with that.
Have you documented your story, writing,
You know,
orally?
there is Sarah. You know, the Spielberg, do you know about the Spielberg Shoah oral history? Well, my children kept on saying, you know, you have to do that, Mommy, and Mommy kept on postponing it. And then all of a sudden, I was in New York, actually, in a cousin's house, and she was talking to somebody in LA, and that somebody said to Judy, whose name is my cousin Judy, not this Judy, and said, they finished in LA. And I said, my kids are going to kill me. I mean, I never did it. And then Sarah called me here. This was, I came back, I was in Atlanta. And Sarah Gittes called me. And actually she said, who do you know in LA? Because she got a call from LA. What happened, my daughter is in LA. She is at Fox Studios, but she knew some people behind the scenes. She's not an actress, and she's an attorney. She knew the person who was in charge of this. She went begging, because I think they did 57,000 women, and I was 57th and one, 57,001. I was the last one. Sarah came, and that's the only reason that is documented. It is now at USC, University of Southern California, have the records. People come and study it. And most universities, my granddaughter is very much involved. And that she does Holocaust studies at the university where she goes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
This was also Sarah's job here. I think she did some more. Anyway, I do thank you for coming. It was really an honor. I hope I didn't confuse you. I hope I clarified some things. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you for the evaluation.